Hi everybody, this is E.T. Today's episode is about Bob Mathias, decathlete, actor, and politician. Bob Mathias, born November 1930, died at age 75 in 2006. The all-American boy was Bob Mathias. Modest, soft-spoken. He came from an all-American town, Tulare, California, and he overcame early health problems. He was small, underweight, continually exhausted, finally diagnosed with anemia, but he developed a 6'2", 200-pound physique that was perfect for generalized track and field competition, well, such as the decathlon, for which he earned Olympic gold at the 1948 London Olympics. He was only 17. That made him the youngest track and field gold medalist ever. And he had only a few weeks of training in the 10 events. A few weeks. That was under the tutelage of his high school coach, Virgil Jackson. The New York Times wrote about his performance in London. In rain, on a track covered with water, on jumping and vaulting runways that were slippery and a bit risky, in a fading light, and finally under floodlights, it was an amazing achievement. Mathias said, quote, "I would not do this again, not for $1 million. But in 1952, he did, and with a record point total. By 1953, Mathias owned 4 U.S. championships, 3 world records, 2 Olympic gold medals, and a degree from Stanford, which, by the way, he represented as a fullback at the 1952 Rose Bowl game. And that was only a few weeks after winning the second Olympic gold. Now here we see Mathias on television in the early 80s with another decathlete, gold medalist, Bruce Jenner, and they're being interviewed by football great Frank Gifford, whose punt, by the way, Bob Mathias returned, that was many years earlier, for 96 yards in order to win Stanford's right to play in that 1952 Rose Bowl game. Bob Mathias was drafted by the Washington Redskins, but he never signed. In fact, his athletic career was pretty much over before he was 22. Because in 1954, he had to go into the Marines. He served until 1956, being discharged as a captain. Then Mathias went into movies. In film and TV, he played himself in the Bob Mathias story with his first wife, Melba. He played Theseus in the movie Minotaur and the Wild Beast of Crete. That was the first of the sword and sandal films that opened a door for later bodybuilders such as Reg Park and Steve Reeves and Lou Ferrigno and Arnold Schwarzenegger. Mathias went on to television and did 26 episodes of The Troubleshooters, playing a character named Frank Dugan. He starred in a movie with Jane Mansfield called It Happened in Athens. But more often than not, Americans could see Bob Mathias in the 70s and 80s as a commentator for sports events. As a politician, Bob made quite a mark. He was elected to the House of Representatives. Now that was preceded and followed by some semi-political functions. For instance, he served the State Department as a goodwill ambassador. He was deputy director for the Selective Service. He was consultant to the President's Council on Physical Fitness. But the big one was his service in the Congress. From 1967 to 1975, Mathias, a Republican, represented California's 16th District in the U.S. House. That was coincidental with the tenure of other California Republican actor-politicians. One you may have heard of, Ronald Reagan. He served as California's governor during the same period Bob was in the House. And there was Senator George Murphy. He represented the state of California in the Senate. And he, by the way, was beaten in 1970 by a Democrat named John Tunney. John Tunney was the son of light heavyweight and heavyweight boxing champion Gene Tunney, who himself had some political ambitions that I'll talk about in a later episode. Mathias was a self-described fiscal conservative. In other words, somebody with a liberal leaning, but not an inclination to pay for it. Bob Mathias said, "The toughest part for me about politics was getting used to going from sports where everybody likes you to something else. And in that world, people stomp on you and say bad things about you." Mathias himself was unseated in 1974 by John H. Krebs, son of a biochemist, Hans Adolf Krebs. Now, Hans Adolf Krebs had done research into what was called the Krebs cycle, which deals, if I recall it right, with cellular respiration, which itself aided future athletes in breaking Mathias's records. Now, the reason for the popular Mathias's loss were, number one, the Democrat California legislature gerrymandered his congressional district, increasing the number of Democrats. And number two, 1974 was a terrible year for Republicans because of the Watergate scandal. The Republicans in that year, 74, lost 48 House seats, including Bob's, 4 Senate seats, 5 state governorships, and numerous state and local and municipal elections. And that was due to a frenzied attack on President Nixon, who himself had been run out of office for fudging the truth about stonewalling an investigation into a break-in about which he had no prior knowledge. Nixon, too, by the way, had modest showbiz ambitions, about which more later. Bob said after he left office that he had no desire to revive his political career. It's for his impressive athletic achievements that Bob Mathias is most remembered. Bill Toomey, himself a gold medalist, a decathlete, said in the mid-60s of Mathias, "I think Bob is probably one of the best representatives the Olympics ever had from this country. He always has time for people." In 1983, Mathias was enshrined in the U.S. Olympic Hall of Fame. He died September 2, 2006, age 75, of cancer. Bob Mathias, one of this country's best and most influential goodwill ambassadors.